The sunlight filtering through the half-drawn curtains caught the dust particles in the air, making them drift like quiet witnesses to the moment. I stood near the doorway of the living room, surrounded by walls dressed in memories, photos of birthdays, graduations, vacations, all framing the life I had built for this family. At the center of the room stood Ava, poised but distant, the light in her eyes gone cold and unforgiving. Her husband, Mark, leaned back with that familiar, arrogant smirk that had only grown sharper with time. "Did you really sign the papers?" I asked, voice trembling but trying to hold firm, the past colliding violently with the harsh present. "Yes, Mother," Ava said slowly, deliberately. "The villa belongs to Mark's family now. We thought it was time for a change, someone who values it enough to take real responsibility." The words stabbed deeper than I expected. This villa was not just a house. It was every sleepless night I spent working late to cover the mortgage when money was tight, every sacrifice I swallowed so my children wouldn't want for anything. It was the dream I had held on to after losing my husband, the place I kept alive for my family's future. Hearing it dismissed so casually made my chest tighten like a vice. "No," I murmured, my hands gripping the edge of a nearby chair to steady myself. "This home, it's mine. It's ours. You can't just give it away." Mark's laugh, low and mean, cut the silence like a blade. "Eleanor, ownership is a legal matter. You signed too many papers, probably too many cups of coffee later to remember clearly. The contracts are all valid. This is nothing personal, just business." A cold numbness spread through me as I realized how thoroughly I had been erased from the picture. Ava stepped closer, every movement precise, her voice colder than the marble floors beneath us. "You were generous, but generosity isn't endless. We deserve this, Mother. Your time has passed." Their dismissal pounded inside my head, a slow, relentless wave washing away years of love and care. I swallowed hard, struggling against a rising tide of grief and fury. "No one can repay what I've given you, the years I worked, the nights I put my own needs aside so you could have more." A flicker of something, guilt, crossed Ava's face, but it vanished before it could reach her eyes. Instead, she offered a smile that felt like a knife twisting. "Appreciation doesn't pay mortgages or secure futures. We're building ours now." Mark moved toward me with a quiet finality, delivering the verdict I feared most. "You're a guest here now, Eleanor, nothing more." The words echoed through the room, suffocating and absolute. Every breath became a battle as I fought to maintain calm, but my hands trembled against my sides. My sanctuary was no longer mine, and the faces I loved had turned into strangers who wished me gone. I took a hesitant step backward, the floor creaking beneath my feet as the weight of betrayal forced me toward the door. The house, once warm with memories, grew cold and alien. No one reached out to stop me. No pleadings or tears followed, only a heavy silence, thick with disdain. I paused just before opening the door, grounding myself against the whirlwind in my mind. The villa, the legacy I had poured decades into, was slipping away, pocketed by those who had once called me mother. The hollow ache inside broadened as I stepped out into the dimming light of the hallway, the door closing softly behind me like the closing of an old chapter. Alone, I realized that something irreversible had just been set in motion. My home was gone. Not just the physical place, but the trust and love that had once made it a sanctuary. The pain cut deep, but somewhere beneath the hurt, a quiet ember of resolve began to glow. This was not the end. It was only the beginning of the reckoning to come. The soft click of the door felt like a seal closing on everything I had once taken for granted. Alone in the quiet corridor, the villa's familiar walls now seemed alien and cold. I moved toward the sitting room, a refuge from the storm brewing inside me. The worn armchair by the window welcomed me, But comfort was nowhere to be found. I sank into it, my thoughts swirling in a tempest of memories and pain. I thought back to the decades of work that had brought me here. The long hours at the firm, juggling complex engineering projects that demanded every ounce of my focus and precision. I remembered the countless nights I stayed late, painstakingly reviewing budgets and plans, all so the mortgage could be paid and my children provided for. It was a life lived in discipline and sacrifice. I skipped vacations, postponed medical care, and denied myself small luxuries so Ava and her brother could have the education and opportunities I never had. The villa was more than a house. It was my fortress, the physical embodiment of all those sacrifices laid brick by brick. But now, those sacrifices seemed invisible to those I trusted most. Ava's face flashed before me, no longer the little girl who clung to me in fear, but the woman who dismissed my pain with a cold smile. How could she look me in the eyes and say we deserved this? Mark's smug assurance that ownership was nothing more than a legal transaction cut deeply. I had always believed family was more than contracts and papers, more than transactions and power plays. I clenched my fists as the sting of betrayal settled over me. Gratitude was absent from their hearts. Selfishness and entitlement filled the air they breathed. It was a deafening silence where love once lived. Yet beneath the ache, a quiet ember of determination began to kindle. I was an engineer, trained to analyze, to plan, to see the unseen weaknesses beneath the surface. I was not powerless. This pain could forge strength. I had tools, my experience, my mind, my patience. I glanced around the room, my eyes falling on an old ledger I kept tucked away. It was my habit to meticulously track every expense, every mortgage payment, every repair. I pulled it from the drawer and turned the pages carefully, the faded ink recounting the story of my life's work. It told of hardships endured, of nights stretched thin by worry and responsibility. It was proof of a legacy of resilience and love. With this ledger, I could begin to unravel the truth, challenge the dismissive arrogance of Ava and Mark. Their entitlement was built on ignorance of the foundation I had laid. I thought of the nights I refused new clothes despite stiffening joints, the times I worked through illness to keep the household afloat. I remembered the sacrifices that no one appreciated because they were invisible, hidden beneath polite smiles and empty promises.
It was a cruel irony that the very people I had protected now sought to erase my place in my own home. Loneliness pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. Old friends had drifted away. Colleagues had retired or moved on. Family ties, it seemed, were frayed beyond repair. But I had endured solitude before. My career had been forged in long, lonely hours of problem-solving and quiet determination. I could do this again. I resolved to start digging deeper. I would pore over every file, every legal document, every bank statement linked to that villa. I would find weaknesses in their claims, holes in their promises. I would call on old contacts, lawyers, accountants, trusted colleagues who understood the language of contracts and financial webs. This would not be a battle of fists or fury, but of mind and will. The villa itself was more than property. It was a testament to decades of persistence. Its gardens had witnessed my children's first steps.
Its rooms had echoed with laughter and tears. Its walls had sheltered us through storms both literal and emotional. To lose it to those who valued it only as a prize to be taken was unthinkable. Memories flooded me, the countless tuition payments made, the nights hunched over ledgers lit only by the dim glow of a desk lamp, the steady, unspoken love woven into every decision. I had built this life on patience and sacrifice. Ava's betrayal stripped away the meaning behind it all, but it steeled my resolve instead of shattering me. Darkness settled outside the window, the last traces of daylight extinguished. And yet inside me a fire began to burn, quiet but fierce. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was becoming a strategist, ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The skills honed in a lifetime of engineering and budgeting, careful analysis, meticulous planning, and steadfast perseverance were weapons I would wield with precision. This was a turning point. The villa, my legacy, was slipping through my fingers, but I would not let it go without a fight. I would gather every fact, every piece of evidence that could expose the truth hidden behind their arrogance. This was no longer about forgiveness or family harmony. It was about justice. It was about restoring what was taken with callous disregard. As the night deepened, I sat alone, a quiet storm gathering within me. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but I was prepared. Pain had sharpened my focus, betrayal had fueled my fire, and experience had armed my mind. This was my reckoning, and I would meet it head-on, unyielding, unbroken, and unafraid. Days later, the letter arrived, a thick envelope bearing the unmistakable stamp of legal finality. I held it in my hands with a mix of dread and anticipation, fingers trembling as I unfolded the pages. The words on the letterhead confirmed the nightmare I already knew but feared to confront fully. Ava and Mark's plan was not just a betrayal of trust, it was a calculated assault on everything I had built. Their lawyers detailed a web of claims, contracts signed under questionable circumstances, adjustments to documents that contradicted the ones I remembered keeping safe in my files. There were signatures that did not look quite like my own, dates that seemed impossible, clauses slipped into fine print meant to strip me of control. Fraud. The word echoed in my mind, bitter and raw. As I sat at the kitchen table, the soft ticking of the clock was the only sound accompanying my shock. How could they sink so low? Had the daughter I raised willingly become an accomplice in tarnishing my name and stealing my legacy? The realization cut deeper than any spoken insult. It was not only property they had taken, but my dignity. But before grief could fully consume me, another blow landed. A mutual acquaintance, someone who had been present at a recent gathering, sent me a message, the sting of betrayal fresh in their words. Ava had publicly denied my contributions in front of others, painting me as a distant, selfish mother too busy with work to care. She had erased years of sacrifice, twisting the story to her advantage, casting me as the villain in a narrative she controlled. The humiliation was staggering. My hands gripped the edges of the table, knuckles white, as fury and sorrow fought within me. I closed my eyes, gathering the remnants of calm from deep inside. This was a turning point. I could no longer be the grieving mother clinging to broken hopes. Sorrow must yield to resolve. I needed to think like the woman I had always been beneath the kindness, the strategist who had navigated complex projects, deciphered financial labyrinths, and outmaneuvered corporate rivals. I recalled the patience woven through years of engineering projects, identifying flaws, finding strengths, building plans adaptable to shifting circumstances. I knew I could dismantle their lies one step at a time, carefully and purposefully. I was no longer reacting, I was planning. The first step was to gather irrefutable evidence. I revisited the vault of personal records, the original titles, mortgage statements, correspondence with banks, receipts from every repair or renovation I had authorized. I labored over every detail, comparing, cross-referencing, searching for inconsistencies in their claims. I called an old friend, a lawyer retired now, but someone I trusted implicitly. His voice was steady when I explained, his anger barely suppressed at the depths my family had sunk to. Together, we began to unravel the threads of deceit, piecing together timelines that cast doubt on the fraudulent documents. Meanwhile, preserve the original language of the text, as I uncovered financial tampering, missing payments, redirected checks, funds siphoned off without my consent. Evidence that would not only challenge ownership claims, but also expose their desperation and dishonesty. With every discovery, my resolve hardened. Their public denials no longer felt like personal attacks, but opening moves in a game I was ready to play. I was no longer a victim. I was an adversary, calculating, patient, relentless. Yet beneath the strategic mind, a quiet ache lingered. Grief for the daughter I had lost to ambition and greed. Memories surfaced unbidden. The way Ava's eyes had once lit up with dreams when she was a child. The nights I had stayed awake envisioning a bright future for her. The laughter that echoed through these very halls. But those memories, bittersweet as they were, only fueled my determination. I would prove that my love had been real, my sacrifices undeniable. There were moments when loneliness pressed close, when the path ahead felt steep and exhausting. But I remembered the years of solitude in my career, the skills forged in those crucibles: focus, resilience, adaptation. This would be no different. I would engage the methodical patience that had carried me through storms before. As the days passed, I structured a plan not built on rash emotions but cold logic. I mapped out steps to regain control through legal avenues, financial audits, and strategic exposures. I would reclaim the villa not just with documents, but by dismantling their house of cards. Every hidden debt they ignored, every forged signature, every falsified claim would be brought into the light. The hardest part was balancing the deep hurt with the clarity I now possessed. I allowed myself the fleeting moments of sorrow, but refused to be consumed by them. Instead, I channeled every emotion into crafting a path forward. Late nights turned to early mornings as I pored over files, prepared letters, and arranged meetings with experts who could back my claims. I was meticulous, precise, unwilling to leave a single stone unturned. Each step felt like regaining a fragment of my dignity. At times, I imagined the faces of Ava and Mark, their confidence shaken by the quiet storm gathering behind the scenes. They had underestimated me, forgotten the woman beneath the soft smiles and quiet generosity. I was no longer the passive mother. I was a force ready to reclaim her rightful place. Despite the legal complexities, I felt a renewed clarity, a singular purpose guiding me through the labyrinth of betrayal and deception. Each day was a battle within myself and against them, but the scales had begun to tip. I was no longer defined by the wounds they inflicted, but by the strength I was forging from them. My grief had shaped a new identity, one of calm, calculated determination. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a war of truths against lies, intellect against greed.
And I was ready to fight. The moment I chose to move past the swirling emotions of grief and betrayal, a familiar sense of focus settled over me. The woman who had spent decades mastering the meticulous, demanding world of corporate engineering, the one who thrived on precision and strategy, reclaimed her place in my mind. All those years of scrutinizing complex plans, balancing budgets, and leading projects with unwavering attention to detail became my arsenal against the unfairness inflicted upon me. I began by gathering every scrap of paper that documented my ownership and investments, deeds, mortgage statements, repair invoices, correspondence with financial institutions, and copies of contracts. Each document was a testament, a thread in the truth knot I would unravel the moment I dived into Ava and Mark's claims. I paired their submissions side by side with my records, meticulously combing through every detail. Their so-called contracts bore glaring mistakes, signatures that lacked my personal flourish, dates that did not align with my records, and clauses carefully buried in illegible fine print. The amateurish sloppiness of these forgeries did nothing to keep the truth hidden, and I cataloged each anomaly with cold precision. I knew that those flaws were the cracks in their facade. Nights blurred into early mornings as I pored over this evidence, my only companion a dim desk lamp that cast long, angular shadows across stacks of paperwork.
I felt the same drive and determination I had known in years past, strengthened by careful strategic thinking rather than rash emotion. I reached out to old colleagues and trusted friends whose expertise spanned legal affairs and financial audits. Some owed me professional allegiance from past collaborations, others simply respected the integrity I had maintained through my career. Their counsel was a lifeline, illuminating new tactics and opening avenues I would never have found alone. What struck me most was their reckless arrogance. Ava and Mark had played recklessly with the villa's finances, leaving obvious trails of debts ignored and transactions manipulated. Accounts were opened and closed without proper authorization. Funds had been diverted under counterfeit approvals. Their overconfidence became their undoing. Each uncovered misstep added weight to the case I was building, a weight impossible to ignore or explain away. The villa itself was no longer just a family home. It had become a battleground. More than mere bricks and mortar, it was alive with the memories of decades of love, sacrifice, and perseverance. I pictured the garden under the warm sun, where laughter had once blossomed. I recalled evenings spent with my late husband, hands clasped over plans and dreams, dreaming of a future that was supposed to last forever. This place, forged by years of sweat and tears, was more than an asset. It was the heart of my family legacy. With the patience of a project manager orchestrating a complex build, I devised my strategy. Every constraint was noted, every potential obstacle anticipated. I began with safeguarding whatever I could control. Together with a lawyer I trusted implicitly, we moved swiftly to freeze any asset transfers related to the villa. Lawsuits and injunctions were filed to halt further transactions, peeling away Ava and Mark's grip layer by layer. Concurrently, I traced the hidden flow of money. Silent withdrawals that had circumvented my authorization were flagged and investigated. I requested forensic accountants to dissect the financial maze Ava and Mark had spun, each report confirming the web of deception. Thanks to my own background, I could understand the intricate findings fully and respond effectively. Every move I made was counter to the wild hopes they pinned on their facade. I met Ava several times, once in a tense gathering where she scoffed openly at my attempts to dig into their records, but I refused to be rattled. My replies were quiet, measured, backed by evidence and counsel. The controlled calm in my voice fueled her fury, and the anger behind her veiled threats only underscored her desperation. Behind the scenes, I wove a network of support. Lawyers, forensic experts, old friends, even individuals with loose ties to Ava and Mark began questioning their integrity. Piece by piece, my coalition strengthened, turning rumors into credible testimony. I was no longer isolated in this fight. I had allies who matched my resolve. Yet the conflict was more than paperwork and legal maneuvers. It was profoundly personal. Nightly, I wrestled with the ache of betrayal and loss. Sometimes quiet tears slipped away while memories flooded my mind. Ava as a playful child, her trusting face lit with innocence. The dreams I had nurtured for her alongside my own shattered hopes. But every sorrowful reflection was transmuted into fuel to keep pushing forward. I was no longer the broken mother, but a strategist recalibrating for battle. My years managing intricate projects proved invaluable as I organized my days into disciplined segments. Mornings devoted to in-depth research and document analysis. Afternoons for meetings with legal and financial professionals. Evenings spent drafting letters, communicating with supporters, and preparing for the next move in court. No longer was the villa simply a home to me. It was my case study in perseverance and justice. I often found my mind circling back to Ava and Mark, their confidence tinged with arrogance, their careless underestimation of the mother they had betrayed. How could they forget the woman who had handled multi-million-dollar projects with unmatched discipline? I was not an opponent to be dismissed, but a formidable adversary who knew every weakness in their lines. The villa's fate was inseparably linked to my own redemption. Removing their fraudulent claims was imperative, but I knew I had to dismantle their credibility as well. Their entitlement collapsed slowly under the weight of uncovered truths. The community's faith in them wavered as evidence trickled into public knowledge. The months of pressure began to erode their bravado. I intercepted anxious calls. Cryptic messages from their acquaintances tipped me about the unraveling confidence in their camp. The facade they had built started to fracture irreversibly. Legal battles exhausted me. Hours spent in sterile offices, battling procedural delays, drafting motions for every small advantage. Still, the strength I drew from knowing I was reclaiming my dignity and legacy sustained me. The villa was a monument to decades of sacrifices. Losing it was unthinkable. My approach was patient yet relentless. Each move was calculated, balancing the need to expose them fully while preventing any misstep that could weaken my position. I worked with experts to scrutinize every legal document, every financial transaction. My contacts in municipal and legal offices were invaluable in ensuring no procedural errors favored Ava and Mark. I compiled detailed dossiers documenting every proof of financial deception and forged signatures in preparation for presenting my case to the court. Prepared for their counters, I crafted responses grounded in cold facts, committed to dismantling their defenses with clarity. In quiet moments, I contrasted my values against theirs. Where Ava believed in entitlement, I upheld that true legacy was forged by sacrifice, hard work, and integrity. That was my guide through this dark trial. Sometimes I walked the empty halls of the villa alone, feeling the weight of memories and determination entwined.
My home was still mine in spirit, no matter what false papers claimed. Slowly, piece by piece, I reclaimed it. There was no room now for anger-driven mistakes. This battle was a measured application of pressure, slow but unyielding. Step by step, I tightened the grip on their lies, unshackling my rightful claim. And as I stripped away the mask of arrogance from Ava and Mark, I felt no joy in their defeat, only the hard-earned satisfaction of justice served and honor preserved. The woman who had been discarded was now the architect of their undoing, wielding intellect and experience as her tools. In that moment, I understood this fight had remade me. No longer simply Eleanor, the mother betrayed, but a force tempered by loss, sharpened by resolve, unwavering in purpose. The villa echoed this strength, the heart of a woman who refused to surrender. The reckoning had truly begun, and I was ready to see it through to the end.
The text, I never imagined that fighting for my own home would mean entering a war of wills that tested every ounce of my patience, resilience, and resolve. Yet as the weeks turned into months, I embraced the cold, calculated course I had charted. Each step forward was deliberate, every action a brick laid carefully in the fortress I was building against Ava and Mark's deceit. The first strike came not in court but behind the scenes. With the help of my legal team, I secured injunctions freezing all accounts tied to the villa and any associated assets. It was a decisive move, immediately choking any flow of funds Ava and Mark might have depended on. The quiet power of that control shifted the balance subtly but unmistakably. I could sense the unraveling beginning. Their panic was almost palpable. Suddenly, their confidence wavered, and cracks appeared in their carefully maintained facade.
I received word through unofficial channels that Ava had stormed into a meeting with their financial advisors, furious and demanding explanations for the freeze. A desperation made all the more thrilling by my calm reaction to the news. I didn't retaliate with noise or fury, but with a steady, quiet presence that unsettled them more than confrontation ever could. One afternoon, I answered their challenge with a clear demonstration of my newfound strength.
Ava barged into my solicitor's office, her face red with frustration and veiled threats simmering in her eyes. She demanded that I reconsider, that I drop my pursuit, but I met her without flinching. "We will proceed," I said evenly, "because truth is on my side. You overstepped, and now you must answer to that." Her attempt to intimidate quickly faded when I laid out some of the key evidence we had uncovered: illicit debts, financial entry inconsistencies, and questionable authorizations. Each document I calmly presented was like a blow, chipping away at her defiance. Mark's response was more subtle, a series of evasive phone calls and terse emails trying to bargain or confuse. But I was prepared. My legal counsel advised me on every counter move, and I listened intently, learning as the battle sharpened my instincts. I remained unshaken by their attempts, each maneuver answered methodically. In the midst of the legal chess game, I kept meticulous track of timelines, tracing every moment when their claims faltered. Days were spent piecing together trails of forged signatures and plans to divert funds through shadowy accounts. I organized the evidence with the precision of an engineer mapping layers, readying for the day these shards of proof would coalesce into an unassailable case. Despite the increasing pressure, I remained focused on the bigger picture, reclaiming my home and exposing the truth. There was no room for rash decisions. Every move was strategic. When Ava or Mark tried to bluff or misdirect, I stayed calm, letting their bluster reveal weaknesses I could exploit. The conflict extended beyond quiet offices and legal debates. Their desperation sometimes spilled into confrontations. I remember one evening, during a rare visit to the villa, a moment that tested my composure. As I walked through the familiar rooms alone, the weight of memories pressing against me, Ava appeared unexpectedly, her voice sharp as she accused me of trying to ruin her future. But I did not yield. "We each choose our own path," I said firmly. "I chose to protect what's rightfully mine. You chose deception." Her fury sputtered into silence. In those moments, I realized I had transcended the broken mother cast aside and become a measured storm, calm yet unstoppable. Every account frozen, every halted payment increased the pressure on their fragile grip over the villa. Their daily lives became riddled with anxiety as financial stability slipped away. I heard whispers of frantic meetings, rising tempers, and fractured alliances on their side. I continued deploying calculated pressure points, filing injunctions to stop alterations in property titles, involving municipal authorities to review questionable deeds, and preparing requests for financial audits that exposed more holes in their narrative. Behind the scenes, my legal team kept me informed and empowered. I was no longer a passive victim, but an active commander of my defense, absorbing every lesson the battle brought. I learned to anticipate their countermoves, to prepare for delays and obfuscations, to endure the long haul. Some days were exhausting, the emotional toll heavy, but the drive to reclaim my legacy never wavered. I recalled late nights from my engineering days, that same tenacity pushing me forward now with renewed purpose. No longer haunted by sorrow, I embraced determination as my shield. Conversely, Ava and Mark's desperation grew more apparent. I witnessed their arrogance crumble gradually when faced with legal realities they had overlooked. The once bold threats on the periphery became quieter, replaced by anxious inquiries and subtle defenses. I maintained my distance, refusing any offers of truce or negotiation that compromised my position. Their attempts to sow discord or doubt fell flat against my unwavering resolve. I was grounded in proof and strategy. They were adrift in panic and deceit. The villa itself mirrored this struggle, its halls bearing silent witness to the unfolding battle. I walked its corridors regularly, drawing strength from the memories engraved into its structure. Laughter echoing from walls, childhood footsteps in the garden, storms weathered together as a family. Though alone more now, the home still belonged to me. In one moment of respite, I sat on the veranda overlooking the garden,
clutching an old photo of the family. Despite the pain and conflict, I felt steady. The villa was more than a prize. It was my legacy. I would not lose it to greed and betrayal. The equilibrium was shifting daily. Ava and Mark were no longer the unshakable forces I once feared, but subjects to unraveling truths closing in. I remained calm, a calculating presence pressuring with precision. At times, I allowed myself small, private victories. A victory in court orders restrained, a new witness willing to speak out, a financial transaction halted before damage occurred. Each success was a beacon amid the storm. Through it all, I never lost sight of the ultimate goal: restoration. The villa's walls were saturated with years of sacrifice and love. Reclaiming it was reclaiming my dignity, my identity, my history. I was no longer the woman pushed aside in silence. I was a strategic force of intellect and endurance. They had failed to grasp the depth of my resolve.
And that was their undoing. The fight was not yet over, but for the first time since the betrayal, I saw daylight ahead, justice within my grasp, and the villa slowly, inevitably, coming home. I stood firm, steady as the foundation I had laid 15 years ago, ready to see this battle through every twist, every challenge, every moment, until victory was mine. The morning of the final hearing arrived wrapped in quiet stillness, masking the storm of emotions that churned within me. The courthouse loomed ahead, its grand facade a stoic monument to law and order, justice and closure. But as I stepped through its doors, I knew this moment was far from an ending. It was the culmination of years' worth of pain, betrayal, and tireless work. The battle to reclaim the villa, to restore not just a home, but a legacy, was coming to its most defining chapter. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. The day had been scheduled for hours of painstaking examination,
full of the dry language of legal argument and factual presentation. There were no dramatic flourishes, no raised voices, just endless exchanges of documents, hours of testimony, and the quiet weight of truth. I was prepared. Every piece of evidence I had painstakingly collected over the months, property deeds peppered with forged signatures, contracts edited with sinister precision, financial records showing siphoned funds, lay ready to be unveiled. It was my story, written in ink and numbers, the story of a mother who had given everything to build a sanctuary, shattered and stolen by those she loved most. I watched covertly as Ava and Mark took their seats across the courtroom. Where once they had exuded arrogant confidence, I now saw thinly veiled anxiety flickering in their expressions. The facade of entitlement that had been their armor was cracking beneath the weight of their own deceit. The hearing unfolded with methodical precision. My legal team began by presenting forensic analyses of the documents they had challenged, explaining step by step how signatures had been forged and how the financial manipulations had been concealed in layers of falsehood. The testimony of the experts was clear and compelling. Their voices carried the authority of irrefutable facts. I followed the proceedings with steady breath and unwavering gaze. Years of experience managing complex projects, which demanded calm logic under pressure, served me well. As the judge posed questions, I answered with clarity and honesty, explaining the emotional and financial stakes behind the dry language of contracts. I was no longer just a claimant. I was a witness to a life's work stolen, a guardian fighting to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Ava's defense waned as the cracks beneath their story widened. Their counsel's attempts to cast doubt were met with overwhelming counterproof. No amount of obfuscation could undo the meticulous record I presented, piece by piece dismantling the false narrative. I caught glimpses of Mark shifting uncomfortably, his usual poised demeanor replaced by subtle signs of tension. Ava, who had once confronted me with hostility, now sat muted, her features tight with frustration and disbelief. They were forced to face a reality where deceit no longer paid dividends. When my attorneys called witnesses, bank officials, accountants, and former collaborators, the courtroom filled with testimony that corroborated every assertion. Each voice strengthened my position, turning the tide from suspicion to certainty. The painstaking hours poring over files, the sleepless nights scouring every detail, the relentless pursuit of truth, all led to this moment. The final hours were long and exhaustive. Every argument mattered. Every delay risked advantage. Yet, throughout, I remained unshaken. The villa was not just a property, but a symbol of everything I had endured. Losing it was unthinkable. At last, the judge's voice cut through the tense silence. The verdict was definitive. Ownership was restored to me. The fraudulent claims pushed by Ava and Mark were invalidated, the manipulations exposed, and the villa declared mine in every legal right. Relief and disbelief mingled as a flood of emotions washed over me. Justice was not a distant ideal, but a living reality, tangible and radiant. I had reclaimed not only a home, but my dignity, my hard-won legacy. The house that had once been a place of pain and loss would now stand as a monument to endurance and truth. I observed Ava and Mark's faces as the final judgment settled. Shock, anger, and helplessness mingled in their eyes. Their empire of entitlement collapsed into ruins, their standing shattered. For so long, they had wielded arrogance like armor, but today that armor was broken. Stepping outside into the afternoon light, the world felt sharper and kinder. Sunlight bathed the streets, and the burdens I'd carried for so long began to lighten. I was exhausted, but in that very exhaustion I found strength, a promise of renewal and hope. The villa's fate had been decided, but the road ahead was still winding. Healing, rebuilding, restoring trust, these tasks stretched before me. Yet, the victory in court was a beacon, a foundation upon which I could now build again. That evening, back at the villa, I wandered through familiar halls with reverence. The creak of aged wood beneath my feet, the soft whisper of the breeze through open windows, all spoke of resilience and memory. I stood in the living room, letting the weight of the past mingle with the promise of the future. This place was more than walls and a roof. It was the embodiment of years of love, sacrifice, and unwavering will. Sitting in the garden, holding a faded family photograph, I traced the faces of children long grown, and dreams that had once seemed fragile but never broken. The villa was their home, and with every step, it was becoming mine once more. The battle had tested every facet of me, heart, mind, soul, but it forged a new strength. I was no longer the silent woman discarded by her family. I was a strategist, an architect of justice, a guardian of legacies. Though the wounds remained, they were not shackles but reminders of resilience. I carried them proudly, ready to face whatever came next. The villa awaited, an empty canvas eager to be filled again with love, laughter, and life reclaimed. I had fought with patience, precision, and resolve. I had won. And this victory was the dawn of a future forged in courage, wisdom, and the enduring power of a mother's love. Standing once again on the villa's familiar grounds, I felt a profound stillness settle over me, like a breath held for years finally released. The sunlight filtered softly through the old oak leaves, casting dappled patterns across the garden where my children had once played, their laughter now echoes carried on the breeze. The scent of blooming jasmine mingled with the faint hint of earth and history, weaving an invisible thread between past and present, pain and healing, loss and hope. This house was much more than walls, much more than timber and stone. It was a testament to every sacrifice I had silently endured, to every sleepless night and unpaid bill, to every moment of strength summoned when life's weight pressed heavily on my shoulders. The villa stood now as a monument, not to what I had lost, but to what I had fought so fiercely to reclaim. The past few years of turmoil had carved scars on my heart, some raw and aching, others dull reminders of battles fought and survived. But those scars were not chains. They were the durable threads that had woven resilience into my very being.
I was no longer the woman once silenced by betrayal and disbelief, the mother cast aside without warning. I was a strategist, a guardian of my own legacy, a woman whose strength had been tested and forged in the crucible of adversity. As twilight draped the sky in deep hues, I walked through the rooms of the villa, moving slowly and reverently, listening to the creaks and whispers of the aged wood beneath my feet. The living room bore the quiet imprint of years filled with laughter and tears, love and endurance. I paused there, letting the weight of the past settle alongside the promise of the future, one I was now determined to shape anew. This house was my story woven into tangible form, a place where every corner held a memory, a fragment of life I had nurtured at all costs. Heading outside, I settled beneath the sprawling branches of the ancient oak in the garden, the very place where Ava and her brother had once chased butterflies in dreams under golden afternoons.
The air was cool now, the gentle rustle of leaves a soothing balm on my weary spirit. In my hands rested a fragile, weathered photograph, the faces of a family once whole, smiles bright and unguarded. I traced familiar contours with tender reverence, cherishing the love and hope captured in that moment. Though the family I had known was fractured beyond mending, this home was my anchor, my chance for healing and renewal. The battles I had waged tested every fiber of my heart, mind, and soul, but they also forged a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I no longer wore the cloak of victimhood. I carried the armor of wisdom and unyielding resolve. I became the architect not just of justice, but of a new chapter, one defined by dignity, resilience, and the enduring power of love. The wounds I bore were real, yet they did not weigh me down. Instead, they marked the path I had walked, a path fraught with pain, but rich with growth. I bore them with pride,
knowing they bore witness to my courage. Every scar was a story, every ache a testament to the tenacity it took to press forward when the world sought to dim my light. The villa was an empty canvas once more, patient, waiting, eager to be filled with the vibrant colors of life renewed. I envisioned rooms alive with warmth and laughter, gardens blooming again with joyful steps. This was not simply a restoration of a house, but a reclamation of hope, a resurrection of dreams deferred. Though the shadows of the past lingered, they no longer haunted me. Instead, they served as silent reminders of survival, of battles won with patience and precision. I was ready for whatever lay ahead, ready to create, to nurture, to embrace this second chance at life. I whispered softly into the evening air, my voice steady and certain. I paid for this home with my years, my love. No one steals a legacy born from sacrifice without facing the reckoning. The words settled in my heart, carrying the weight and grace of all I had endured. The villa was mine, my sanctuary, my home. And as the stars began to blink awake in the deepening sky, I embraced the future with open arms, a future forged in courage, tempered by wisdom, and anchored in the unbreakable bond of a mother's love.